Hey, what's going on, Recreators? Back with another Life Recreated show for you here this Thursday evening. So glad to have you here with us. I am super excited, as always, about what we're going to be diving into and talking about tonight. I wanted to continue with this topic and this idea of learning how to trust myself again, or learning how to trust yourself again after experiencing spiritual abuse, after experiencing this hurtful, this type of church situation. What do we do to learn how to trust ourselves again? And I think one of the reasons that I really wanted to focus on this area of a trust, and we've been dealing with trust this whole month of April, is because trust is such a huge issue, and it's something that a lot of us struggle with after we leave an abusive situation, after we leave these type of environments. It's so hard for us to learn how to trust other people. It's so hard for us to learn how to trust God again. And in this situation, it's hard for us to learn how to trust ourselves again. And so, tonight I wanted to just continue. I know I did a part one last week, and I dove into some things and some areas that and some ways that I learned how to trust myself again, and hopefully they help you. I'll leave a link down in the description below for that first part of this episode on learning how to trust myself again. But without further ado, just wanted to jump in to tonight's topic. Listen, if you're here for the first time and you're joining us, on this channel, we're all about learning, healing, and growing after spiritual abuse. And each week, we tackle these difficult conversations so that we can learn how to heal and walk in freedom in Christ after spiritual abuse. And so let's dive into this. And I really want to just tackle this and kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned and some of the things I've experienced over these last few years in this area of trust. So first off, why is this such a difficult thing for us to really kind of deal with when we leave spiritual abuse? And, me and my wife, we were talking about this just a little while ago. And one of the things I think that becomes a problem whenever we're leaving this type of environment is the issue of this anxiety that is kind of created around making decisions within our life. And what do I mean by that? Usually, a lot of times, if you kind of peel back the curtain, kind of look at some of the layers of what you experience in spiritual abuse, a lot of times these systems are set up, they're kind of manufactured in a way where you're put in a place where you have to rely on situations, you have to rely on things outside of your own self in order to make certain decisions in your life. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, using my own example, for instance, a lot of times from what we experienced was whenever we had to make big decisions, whenever we had to make choices within our lives, a lot of that revolved around us having to either, fast about it, either pray about it, either go and talk to a pastor or an authority about it. My own personal experience, I was a pastor, and so I remember a lot of people coming and talking to me and wanting guidance. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with looking for wisdom and seeking wisdom outside of your own self, because that's the way that God designed this and built this to. When we're put in these environments, in these church environments, we should be able to rely on each other, be able to lean on each other to make those decisions. But what I've experienced and what I've seen, and as I'm researching this, and I've in my own personal experience, is that a lot of times there's a lot of anxiety that is generated around decisions within our lives. We live in a military town. And so, to give you an example, in a military town, we know that we have people that are coming in and out of the military. They're transferring, they're going to different duty stations, they're doing all these different things. And I just remember, even in my own personal experience, the amount of anxiety that is generated around having to pick orders and where you're going to go next. And, you don't want to leave here, you don't want to leave the church, and we're going to pray that you stay here in the church and you stay here in this area, and all these different things. And, when you kind of peel back all of that, and when you kind of look and examine all of those different scenarios, one of the things that you see is that the root cause of all of this is that there's an anxiety that is generated around us as individuals learning how to make our own decisions on our own. When you think about a decision, what you're thinking about is looking at all the facts, looking at what the situation is, looking at what the scenario is, I'm not saying we don't pray. The Bible tells us that we need to ask for wisdom. Any of us that lack wisdom, we need to ask for wisdom. But in these type of environments, there's this underlying anxiety that kind of almost makes you feel like you are not capable or you are not mentally able to make decisions on your own. Now, I can probably guarantee that probably a lot of leaders won't say that outright. They won't say like, "Hey, we're creating this type of environment that makes you have to rely on me for the answers, or makes you have to rely on what the group says for the answers." But at the end of the day, this is what ends up happening. And one of the things that I think that is such a difficulty in us understanding when it comes to spiritual abuse is this psychological, the mental aspect of what happens to individuals that find themselves in these type of environments, and this dilemma, this wrestle that they have with just making simple decisions. Now, the problem that happens with that a lot of times is that once you leave that environment, or once you even build up the courage. I had someone on the last episode I did on learn how to trust yourself that wrote a comment and said, you know what, I found myself in a spiritually abusive system. I see it. I understand what's happening. I'm looking at how they're using the word of God out of context. I'm looking at how all these different things are being manipulated. But this person was saying that, I'm so scared to walk away because I don't know if I'm able to trust myself to make the right decision. And if you really think about it and look at it, that's exactly what these environments want. They want you to be in a position where you have so much anxiety, so much turmoil around simple, basic decisions that you have to rely on them. So guess what ends up happening? A lot of times we stay in these systems for a very long time. Me myself, I was in our church and that spiritually abusive system that we were a part of for many years, 10 plus years. My wife, 16 plus years. People I've talked to, 20 plus years. Why does this happen? Because we see things that are happening that are not, congruent with what the word of God is saying. But because the way that these environments are generated, it's so hard for us to really be able to trust if we're making the right decision to move away and walk away. So, first off, this anxiety is created around it. And so, what we're trying to do, especially in these episodes that I'm talking about trust, is we have to learn how to deconstruct those things and really see where these things are coming from. And more importantly, we have to take the next step to say, okay, I can overcome that anxiety. I can overcome this fear of making my own decisions and being an individual, being an adult, being someone that knows how to make logical, wise decisions on my own, and take the next step and learning on how to rebuild that trust within myself. And so I want to continue tonight looking at a couple different things that really just help me to learn how to trust myself again. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. How do we learn how to trust ourselves again? Part two. Here we go. Number one, we got to remember and we got to understand that as we move past this spiritually abusive system in this environment, that we are going to make mistakes. Listen, mistakes are universal to every single one of us. I don't care who you are, black, white, Chinese, Asian, it doesn't matter who you are, right? We're all going to make mistakes. The issue that a lot of us face is that in these type of environments, our mistakes are highlighted so much. They're made into these big, grandiose things, and these things that seem insurmountable. They seem almost bigger than what we can handle, and so the issue that we face when we walk away from it is that we're going to make these mistakes. And guess what? Guess where these mistakes may come from? They may come from the decisions that we make. And where do those decisions come from? Decisions that we make that after spiritual abuse come from us learning how to trust ourselves and say, you know what? I'm okay with making that mistake. I'm okay with making that decision. I'm okay with moving in a certain direction, because it's okay for me to make that mistake. It's okay for me to maybe wrestle with something or wrestle with a decision that I have to make. And one of the things that I had to learn leaving our environment and leaving that environment was that I had to learn how to make peace with my mistakes. I think one of the things that I'm about to be 40 this year. And one of the things that I really have been focusing on is the fact that I know I've made many mistakes in the 40 years that I've been here on this earth, and I have to learn how to start to make peace with those things. See, in a spiritually abusive environment, what ends up happening is those mistakes are blown up, they're magnified. And so we end up with what? This guilt, this shame, these different fears. And when we feel those that guilty feeling, when we feel that shameful feeling, it's going to cause us to want to hesitate to make decisions again. It's going to want us to kind of hesitate to say, man, I don't know if I can really trust myself in this decision that I'm making. And when you move and you're moving past that spiritually abusive environment, one of the things you got to realize is that you're going to make those mistakes, and that is okay. Listen, we're all, every single one of us walking on the face of this earth, every single day, we're going to make these mistakes. We're going to make these trip ups. We're going to have these setbacks. We're going to have these things that happen that kind of throw us off of, what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. And one of the key things that I had to remember as I left our environment, and that environment was that, let's just talk about even just leaving that environment in general. Let's say I left that environment. There's a lot of anxiety. Am I making the right decision? Can I trust myself? Well, hey, look, at the end of the day, it's going to be okay, right? Because if you're watching this, if I'm speaking this, any mistake that we've made hasn't been life threatening, because we're still here to even have this conversation together, right? We're still here to have these thoughts and these things. So we had to learn that these mistakes that we may make as we move forward and we move out of this environment is okay. God knows exactly where we're at. He knows exactly, the position that we're in. He knows exactly what we face. He knows exactly what's happened to us, but it's okay. I always think about like the woman at the well. When Jesus met the woman at the well, he's asking all these questions. He's asking her about her intimate relationships, all these different things. And she's embarrassed. She says, hey, look, I realize that I've done all these different things. But for Jesus, he was just saying, hey, look, it's okay, man. You're going to make these mistakes. We're going to make those mistakes. You're going to make decisions. You're going to have to learn how to trust yourself again and make those decisions in order for you to move on. So the first thing that I want us to keep in mind is this, that those mistakes are okay. And then we have to learn how to make peace with those mistakes. And that kind of leads me to my second thing that I really had to work on was this, is that I had to remind myself of what I was doing right, in the spiritually abusive environment that we came out of. One of the things that I always think that was constantly highlighted is what we were doing wrong. Sin. Like not being on time, not being where you're supposed to be at, not outreaching where you're supposed to. It was always this constant highlight of the things that we were doing wrong. But as we move out of the spiritually abusive system, we got to start thinking about and looking at what are the things that we're doing right. Right? What are the things that what are the things that we're winning on? What are the things that we're actually making progress on? Because if I can sit down and start learning how to look at the things that I'm doing right, guess what ends up happening? It starts building up my confidence. It starts building up my confidence in my decisions. It starts building up my confidence in the fact that, just because I'm not in this spiritually abusive environment, number one, I'm still saved. Number two, I'm still in my right mind. And number three, God has given me the capacity. He's given me the ability to make these correct decisions as an adult, as a human being. And so when I started to remind myself of the things that I was doing right, it helped me to kind of remember, hey, you know what? Wait a second. I know I may not make all the right decisions. I may not have this all perfect. I probably won't ever get this perfect. But what I do know and what I do recognize is that as I begin to, highlight the things I was doing right, it began to start kind of building up my confidence. I began to start writing in my journal and keeping track of these wins that I would have in my life and these things that I can celebrate in my life as far as decisions are concerned. And what that began to start doing for my brain and for my heart was to say, you know what? Guess what? I am okay to make those decisions on my own. I am okay to learn how to trust myself, because when I start to learn how to trust myself, I can be confident in the fact that God has given me the ability to make those right decisions, to move in the right direction. So I had to remind myself of what I'm doing right. And I'm going to say this again. In these type of environments, a lot of times the main thing that's pointed out are the things that you're doing wrong. I remember when I first became a pastor, someone came up to me. I preached, some sermons and, getting excited and everything like that. And someone came to me and said, hey, Pastor, I don't think you're preaching about sin enough. And I said, okay, well, I mean, I mean, what's the like? Why should I need to? I mean, we all know what we're doing when it's wrong, right? We can feel that feeling, right? We can feel that tension in us that the Holy Spirit kind of brings about of the things that we're doing wrong. So why is it necessary for me to continue to highlight the things that people are doing wrong? Why is it necessary for me to highlight the sin? Why is it, why can't it be necessary for me to begin to highlight how people can live in victory, how people can look at their wins and look at their decisions that they're making on their own, and really celebrating those wins and celebrating those right choices. And so as you're moving out of this spiritually abusive system, as you're moving out of this environment, or maybe you're still in that environment, I want you to start looking at, what is it that I'm doing right? Not in a prideful way, right? We're not trying to be prideful. We're not trying to be all boasty and high and stuff like that. But we're looking at it from a point of view where we say, you know what, I understand that the decisions that I'm making, they're moving me on the right path, because you know what, I have the capacity and I have the ability to make those right choices, right? So number three, we got to learn how to forgive ourselves. Now, I did a whole series on forgiveness, right? Forgiving the people that hurt us, forgiving people maybe that are in that environment or that organization that we came out of. But I had to learn how to really learn how to forgive myself, right? One of the big things that I really struggled with and I wrestled with, especially in that first few months and years after leaving that spiritually abusive environment, was, man, God, how did I let myself stay there that long? Beating myself up, beating myself down, and saying to myself, God, how could I, not be smart enough to move on? And how could I not be smart enough to see the red flags and to see the signs? All these thoughts come to our head. Maybe you're in this environment right now, you've been there for a really long time, and you're thinking to yourself, man, I don't know, if I were to leave, look at all that I would have lost. Look at all the time that I would have spent. Look at all the money that I would have probably given. Look at all the talents that I would have probably given to this environment and to this organization. And one of the things that we can really deal with once we walk out of this spiritually abusive environment is this issue of just self-guilt, really just downing ourselves, really just being down on ourselves for being in that type of environment. But I want to encourage you, look, it don't matter who you are, right? It doesn't matter what walk of life you fall from or where you come from. Any one of us can really kind of get wrapped up and sucked up into a lot of these environments. I had the opportunity to sit down with someone maybe a couple months ago, and me and her were talking, and she was actually a family member of someone that I knew personally that was part of the environment that we kind of came out of. And she said something to me. She was like, man, what, all this time, man, I really just wanted to hate you. I really just wanted to not like you. But when I sat down with you, I recognized, you know what, if my family member could have gotten involved in this, and I know who they are, and I'm talking to you, and I know that this is, we can have a conversation, and we can, respect each other, and we can, respect each other's boundaries. She began to realize that, what, anybody can get involved in that. And so our encouragement tonight is that it doesn't matter where you're at, you can get involved in these different type of things. And this is why this channel is so important, so that we have that awareness, we have the ability to spot these things before we get too deep down the road. And so kind of got off track, but going back to what I was going to say, we got to learn how to forgive ourselves, man. Not even just in spiritual abuse, but just in life in general, right? A lot of us, we carry around a lot of guilt. We carry a lot of weight, a lot of fear. A lot of us, man, that stuff starts to translate within our body, and body pains and aches and headaches, all these different things. And really at the root of it is really learning and really working on the steps that we need to take to learn how to forgive ourselves. So I'm going to jump into the last two. We're about halfway through. But you know what? If you're getting some value out of this content, if what I'm saying is making sense, do me a favor, man. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and then drop a comment down below. I'm loving some of the feedback that we're getting from some of these shows. And, my hope and my goal is, like I said, is to help people to learn, to help people to learn how to heal from this, and really to learn how to move forward in healing and move forward in freedom. So do me that favor, hit that like button, subscribe for me. That definitely helps us out in making sure that we get all of this stuff out to folks that need to help it, right? So let's continue to carry on. How do I learn how to trust myself? The last thing I talked about was learning how to forgive myself. Then next is really learning and working on how to trust others, right? Learning how to trust others. I did a whole video, I did a whole series on learning how to trust others after you've been hurt after spiritual abuse. But my thing right here is this is so key because you know what? The more that I can learn how to extend that grace and extend that trust to others, the more God kind of helps me to learn how to trust myself, right? Because here's what happens when I learn how to trust other folks, guess what? My expectations kind of go down a little bit. I learn how to love with an open palm rather than a closed fist. That's something that I've been working on myself. um but as I begin to start working on learning how to trust those that are around me, especially now in being in a new environment, being in a different space, what I found that it was starting to help me do was to learn how to recognize that, you know, everyone around me is trying just as hard as I am really to walk this life thing out, right? We're all trying to work and learn how to walk all of these different things out. And so as I started learning how to trust, you know, other people, it made me start to learn and recognize that, you know, and if I can trust them, then why can't I trust myself? Right? If I can learn how to put my life or put certain things or put certain areas of my life in the hands of somebody else, then why can't I learn how to put that same trust in myself? Right? Because it really kind of it's hard for us a lot of times to learn how to trust other people without first or without seeing the reciprocal effect of really kind of learning how to trust ourselves as time goes on, right? And this takes time. Look, I'm not saying that there's some folks leave spiritually abusive environments, man, and they never learn how to trust anybody else, and that's fair. I mean, I don't say that's something that's wrong or something that's right. I think everybody's perspective is going to be completely different, you know, when it comes to this. But when I started learning how to trust other people, when I started learning how to like, okay, I'm gonna kind of let the door of my heart open a little bit. I'm gonna start learning how to make these steps to trust other folks. I'm gonna start learning how to really just you know, just open up my heart, open up my mind to learn how to trust people. What it really started doing for me is really started making me think, well, hey, look, if I can trust this person with this area of my life, then why can't I trust myself to make that same decision, right? See, that's kind of like the backwards, kind of like I don't want to use oxymoron, but that's kind of like the backwards situation that happens in spiritual abuse, right? Is that a lot of times we get in these environments where we put so much trust and so much weight on the opinions and the what's the word I'm looking for? We've put so much weight on the opinions and the ability of other people and being willing to trust them, all the while they're sending us a message that we can't trust ourselves. But once we move past this spiritually abusive environment, we get in a mode where we say, you know what, I have to get to a point where I learn how to start trusting other people. And somehow the response to that is that as I learn how to trust others, I can start learning how to trust myself, right? Because here's how it happens. When I learn how to start to trust somebody else, it confirms to me that I know how to make the right decision. I know how to learn how to trust somebody else. And so that builds my confidence. It begins to build my faith in making the right decisions on my own, right? Making the right decisions and moving in the right direction on my own. And so working on how to trust others is huge. And let me tell you this, I'm going to be right up front with you. Hey, that might be a process. That might be something that might take some time. It might be something that takes longer than we really expected. It may be something that takes longer than we anticipated. But at some point, when you leave a spiritually abusive environment, you're going to have to learn how to trust other people. And the byproduct of that is as you learn how to trust others incrementally, it can help you build your trust and your own faith in yourself in making the right decisions, right? And so learning how to trust others is huge. And then the last one is reflection. Reflection. Now, this one's hard. This one can be challenging. It can be difficult because there's a lot of times when we look back on things in our lives, especially when you leave spiritually abusive environments where a lot of those memories, a lot of those things that we reflect on are kind of difficult for us to really dig into, right? They're difficult for us to really kind of unpack and really uncover. But I think the key there is that as we begin to learn how to reflect, one of the things that I hold dear to me is my journal, right? My journal is always with me. I'm always writing in my journal. I'm always looking at stuff. I'm always thinking about stuff and kind of going back and forth and, remembering things and thinking about how I handle certain situations and how I dealt with certain situations. And for me, what that reflection helped me to do was it helped me to basically kind of keep a record of how the decisions that I was making moving forward after spiritual abuse and after experiencing that in that environment. It helped me to look back on the decisions that I began to make and see how they ended up playing out. Right. I might be able to go into my journal a year ago and see something that I was dealing with and see something that I was struggling with and see how I was able to handle it, see how I was able to navigate through that time and through that area and through that, situation in my life, and then see how it played out. And then what does that end up doing? It helps me to like remember, oh, wait a second, hold on, I can make right decisions. I can make these decisions. I can trust myself. Because when I record it, when I reflect on it, I see that the decision I made ended up playing out in a way that helped build me up. The decision that I made helped me, to heal or to grow in some area of my life. And so when I write it down and when I reflect on those different things, it can be so beneficial in helping us to really just unpack a lot of those issues and then really learn how to start trusting ourselves. When I started journaling, I was just like, dude, I mean, somebody recommended it to me and somebody was like, look, I think you should start journaling and start writing down some of these thoughts, start reflecting on these thoughts. And I was like, I don't know about that. Cause we didn't, for me, I don't know, this is me personally. We didn't grow up thinking like that. We didn't think, I didn't know anybody that was willing to say, hey, I write in a journal or I write down these thoughts. I didn't know anybody that personally that was doing that on a regular basis. And so, this whole idea of reflection was something that was kind of foreign to me. It was something that was kind of, a little bit distant from me to understand. But what I started learning was that as I began, especially after moving out of this spiritually abusive environment, when I started writing these things down, when I started documenting, like, okay, how did this situation play out? Even moving forward, how did this situation play out? These were the decisions that I had to make. These were the circumstances that I was faced with, and this is the way that I handled them. These were the results from those situations. And when I see the results as being something that ends up benefiting me, or even if, like I said before, even if I did make a mistake, but I was able to learn from the mistake, I was able to reflect on that and it helped me to build up that trust within myself to say, you know what? I'm not crazy. I know I can make the right decisions. I know I can make decisions on my own. I know I can move forward in this life on my own and really build something magnificent in this life. And that reflection, especially after spiritual abuse, really helped me to see that. It really helped me to understand how important it was for me to really be able to look back on a lot of those things. And so I always encourage folks, when you're walking out of a spiritually abusive system, man, start writing these things down, writing down your thoughts, writing down the things that you face and the emotions that you're dealing with, the challenges that you're facing and the things that you're going through as you process and you walk out of these different type of environments. Because let's be honest, the whole reason I started this channel in the first place was that when you walk out of these spiritually abusive environments, it's not easy. For a lot of folks, it's not easy to move on. There's a lot of things that have to be unpacked. There's a lot of things that have to be dealt with. There's a lot of healing that usually has to occur. And that reflection is so key in helping us to realize and recognize the decisions that we were making and the fact that those decisions that we're making are helping us to really kind of go along the right path that God has for us. And so that's what I got for you this evening, man. I hope that this kind of helps in learning how to trust yourself. Somebody, like I mentioned earlier, they dropped a comment in the last one and they said, you know what, I'm in a spiritually abusive environment right now. I can see it. I can look at what the word of God is saying. I can look at what's being said and see that discrepancy in between them. But the thing that I struggle with is that if I walk away, if I move away, can I trust myself in making the right decision to move away? Look, God tells us in his word, any of us that lack wisdom, just ask for it, right? Ask for wisdom, right? A lot of times in these environments, and I'm just speaking from my own experience and what I've experienced personally that happening to me, and being on the flip side of being someone in leadership and someone that was a pastor, trying to navigate through these different things. I know that a lot of times in these environments you're not really encouraged to make your own decisions, right? You're not really encouraged to learn how to rely on yourself, right? Because if you learn how to rely on yourself, then guess what? You start asking these questions, you start looking at things differently, you'd start light bulbs start going off. I mean, these different things will start happening, and a lot of times in these environments they don't want those questions to be asked, right? They don't want people to have to learn how to rely on themselves, and they may say it, right? They may act like it, but let's be honest, right? A lot of times we want, in those type of environments, the people in that organization to rely on leadership, to rely on this kind of appointed leadership from top down. And so, you know, going out, like I was saying, you find yourself in that situation. You're like, God, I don't know if I could trust myself. Look, ask God for the right wisdom, right? Go through these things that we talked about, recognizing that, look, these mistakes, they're okay. I got to remind myself of the things that I'm doing right. I got to learn maybe how to forgive myself. I got to work on how to, trust others, and kind of step past those different things. And, I believe God can help us to really just make those right decisions and move forward. And so, that's what I have for us this evening. Man, I hope this was encouraging to you. I hope it helped, just in a little way. I mean, I know it ain't going to fix all the problems, it's not going to answer all the questions, and that's not really the whole point of it, right? Because I've learned that this whole healing process is really just building blocks over and over and over and over and over again. And we're just building and building and building until we find ourselves really just walking and learning how to walk in that healing. And so, as I sign off this evening, I want to encourage you. Next month is going to be Mental Health Awareness Month. One of the things that I've recognized and that I've learned, and that maybe I've seen, is how when you walk out of spiritually, abusive situations, how much this impacts our mental health. How much it impacts our mental health. Now, I make a disclaimer. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a doctor. I don't know any of those different things. All I know is what I've been studying and what I've been looking at. I'm a prior veteran. I've helped, the VA deal with PTSD and different things like that. But one of the correlations that I started seeing, and this is what we're going to dive into next week, is the impact on our mental health after spiritual abuse. And there's some topics that I want to dive into as far as PTSD and spiritual abuse. I want to look at our anxiety and spiritual abuse. All right. Last year, I struggled with a lot of anxiety and not understanding and recognizing where it came from until I started digging really deep into it. I want to look at depression and spiritual abuse. Last year, again, was the first year I've ever really dealt with depression and dealt with understanding what that feels like and what being in that space feels like, and beginning to start piecing together how my experience, was linked to these things that I was feeling and the things that I was going through. And so those are a few of the things that we're going to try and talk about next month. And hopefully those things will help, like I said, help build some of the little building blocks that can really help us in our healing. But until next time, this has been Nick, Life Recreated Show. Do me a favor, keep learning, keep healing, and keep growing.